Now we're going to learn Daf Hey Amud Beis. We're looking for a source or essay dochalosas. And the Gemara says, Mikra Kamal. Let's go back to Smichus HaParshios of Kilayim V'tzitzis in Parshas Ki Teitze. The Torah says, Lo tilba shatnes, sever ufishtim yachtov, gedilim taselecha. And we assume that the Torah deliberately placed the Iser of Shatnes, of Kilayim, next to, contiguous to, the essay of Tzitzis, to teach you that the essay of Tzitzis overrides the law of Kilayim. But we said that according to Chachamim, that's how we started today, it's impossible because it's not Panu, it's not Mufna. We need the Pasuk to teach me what's called Dumya Dilavisha. We have an Iser Halah, and we might think that the Iser Halah will apply to the case of Mochei Ksus. We needed the Pasuk, Lo Silbash, to teach me that the Iser Halah only applies if he has Hana Kederech Levisha. So the Gemara says, you know what's redundant? Imkain, Lema Krot Tzitzis Tasel. The Torah in the parsha of Tzitzis, in Shlach Lecha, says that you should wear tzitzis. And here it says, Gedilim. Gedilim Lamali. Why this unusual choice of a word Gedilim instead of the classic mitzvah of tzitzis, which is called tzitzis? Shma mino lafnuye. It must be that this word Gedilim is redundant, and it's going to allow me to darshan tzmichus haparshias. And again, we're in Sefer Dvarim. So even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that with Dorish Smuchin in Sefer Dvarim in Mishnah Torah. Elo what? We need Mufna, but now we have Mufna because why did the Torah have to add Gedilim? What's epis Gedilim? So it's tzitzis. Gemara says, wait a minute. I need the word Gedilim. Gedilim is going to teach me that I need 4 chutim that we loop through the hole of each one of the knafos and make 8 chutim out of 4. How so? L'shi'ura hudiyas. Gedil had the Torah only said Gedil shnayim. Right? Gedil means that you loop it through the hole. That's called a Gedil. And the chut lot falls down on both sides of the hole. So you've got 2. But now it says Gedilim. Gedilim means 4. So the word Gedil, which means Shnayim, and here we want to say the following. Shnayim means Shnei Chutim, because it's impossible to create a Gedil and lend it to Kricha and Shazira, which we'll see later on. We have to wrap it around, unless you have a minimum of 2 chutim. So a Gedil in the singular would be made up of 2 chutim that are looped through the hole, making 4 chutim if you count it on both sides. Now it says Gedilim to double it, and that teaches me 8 chutim. Asay Gedil uposleu mitocho. Right? Posleu means after you put it through the holes, then you make what's called chutim nifradim. And that's called psilim. So to summarize, what we need to know is that you've got to put the chutim on the 4 corners, and it's got to flow down as chutim prutim. And the word gedilim is going to teach me the number of chutim that we need, namely 4 chutim, because a gedil is 2 chutim, and you double it and you get 4 chutim. 4 chutim, when you make it into a psil, means 8 chutim. You can't use the word gedilim, therefore, to derive any conclusions about esei dochalosas. And the Gemara says in Cain, you know what? If you're telling me that the word gedilim is necessary to teach me shiura, then lemakra, the pasuk could have said, lo silbashat neis, temeru fishtim, and that would have been enough. Yachtov Lamalu. Why did the Torah add the word Yachtov? Shma Minol Afnuye. So the word Yachtov is a superfluous word, and it's going to teach me that through the Smichas HaParshios, we derive the conclusion that Esei Dochalosis. Gemara says, wait a minute. I need the pasuk Lo Silbas Shatnes and Tzemeru Pishtim Yachtov. The word Yachtov is going to teach me something fundamental about the Isur Kilayim. Vakati mi boile l'tochev shtei tchifos. If a person takes a needle, a sewing needle, and he sews 2 tfiros of tzemeru pishtin yachtov, and now he's creating a chibur between the tzemer and the pishtim, that's called chibur. Why? Because he did 2 tfiros. But tchifa achas, if he only took the tzemer and pishtin and put the needle through them only once without looping them around for a second time, ain't no chibur. That's very flighty, very flimsy and temporary. That's not a violation of Kilayim. Kilayim has to be tzemer upishtim yachtov, and yachtov means chibur. And for that, I need 2 tchifos. So again, how can you derive from the parsha of Kilayim and tzitzis esei dochalosaseh? It's not mufna. I need yachtov. And the Gemara answers, im kain. If you're telling me that this parsha of Lo Silbash Tzemeru Pishtin Yachtov, Lo Silbash Tzemeru Pishtin Yachtov is necessary, then why did you add the word Chatnes? Lo Silbash Tzemeru Pishtin Yachtov. Yachtov means shtei tchifos, in which you take Tzemeru Pishtin and you make a chibur out of them. So why do I need the word Chatnes? Shma Minol Afnuye. The word Shatnes is superfluous, and therefore will derive Esei Dochalos. Vakati, the Gemara says, Mi boile, I need Shatnes. Why? Ad sheyehei shua tavui v'nuz. The word Shatnes is nutrikin, if you take it apart, for 3 smaller words that have been combined into one, and they tell you exactly when and how you violate the Isur Kilayim. And you need number 1, shua, number 2, tavui, and number 3, nuz. All these 3 words are describing the chibur of tzemeru pishtan that creates kilayim. Shua means srukim. In other words, they have to be combed. Both the linen and the tzemer are combed together. Tavui, they're woven together. And nuz means we integrate them in the final process of ariga. So these are 3 different processes, all of that require yachtov, of tzemeru pishtan, in order to generate shatnes. So shatnes is nutrikin, but shua, tavui, v'nuz. Gemara answers, elakula mishatnes nafka. The din of shua, tavui, v'nuz, and also the fact that this parsha of Kilayim is mufnes is mishatnes nafka. We're going to derive it from shatnes. If the Torah only wanted to teach me shua tavi v'nuz, the Torah would have written out shua tavi v'nuz. But because the Torah used this very strange term shatnes, anutrikim, it means that the Torah was telling us a message. We should darshan something from this unusual syntax of the word shatnes. And in the footnote here, he quotes the Tosas Rosh. It says, the fact that the Torah uses a shorter language than a longer language, that doesn't make it mufna and allow you to darshan smooth. So that's the kash of the Rosh on this Gemara. Now the Gemara has the following kash. We know that an essay could override a losas. For example, the case of Kilayim. But Kilayim only generates an Isur Malchus if you violate Kilayim. The Torah doesn't say anything about an Isur Kares. For example, in the case of Yibum, we derived the Arayos from Achos Ishto, or Leha. Why do you need a Leha? Because Vese Dochalosis? That's only a Losa Greda. But Losa Sheesh Bo Kares, like Achos Isha, Hecha Ashkan Dochi, what would be the Havmil to say that the essay would override a Losas of Achos Isha, which is a classic Losas Sheesh Bo Kares. So from essay Docha Losas of a classic Losas Sheesh Bo Malchus, you would not be able to know that an essay could override a Losas Sheesh Bo Kares. So why do we need a Leah? The Gemara now is going to take a few possibilities and see if we could work it out. Number one, you know why I would say essay dochalosa sheshbal kares? Chitema nelif mi mila. Mila overrides the Shabbos. The Torah says in Vayikra Yud Beis ubayom hashmini imol b'sar alasa, and the Gemara darshans in Shabbos Tav Kuf Lamed Beis yom hashmini afilu b'Shabbos. So the 8th day of the baby's birth overlaps with Shabbos. We will implement Mila for the sake of an essay. The essay of Mila will override the Losa Sheish Bo Kares of Shabbos. Anna ben Shoel, why did we bother the entire block Gemara that we've been learning here to derive essay Dochalosa, Kalan B'tzitzis, and Nazir, and Rosho, and Tiglachas, Mitzora? What do we need all that? If the Gemara thinks that from Mila you could derive the conclusion that an essay is Docha Losa Sheyesh Bo Kares like Shabbos, it's Kolshkin, how much more so than an essay like Tiglachas, etc., could override a Losa like Pas Sekano or Pas Rosho. In any event, the Gemara very quickly rejects this. And we cannot derive anything from the case of Mila. Why? Because at the same time that you are considering the weight of the losase, we had all these different gradations of Churmas Alav, you also have to grade the Essex. And Mila is very high on the totem pole. The word bris Mila appears in the Torah not once, not twice, but 13 times. Each one teaches you that it's a bris Mila. So there really are, in effect, many, many different mitzvahs that are fulfilled through one single action of Mila, 13 brisos, and that's why bris Mila could override a losas hashesh bo kares. But to derive from this that Yibum, which is a classic essay, would be docha losas hashesh bo kares, and therefore you need Oleh to tell you otherwise, who would want to derive such a conclusion? The Gemara says, I'll give you another place where an essay, another case where an essay overrides a losas hashesh bo kares, and that's Korban Pesach. Because in the case of Korban Pesach, if the 14th of Nisan falls on Shabbos, we will shech the Korban Pesach. And this is derived to the Gemara Psachim Ayin Zayin. From the Pasuk in Baloscha, it says, V'yasu b'nei Yisrael sa-pasach b'moado. And the Gemara dashes b'moado afilu b'Shabbos. So we see that the mitzvah of Korban Pesach overrides the Shabbos, even though Shabbos is a lav sheish bo kares, and therefore Yibum would override Achos Isha in the Havamina before Oleh. Or rejects that. Mala Pesach shekain kares. We're talking about an essay, the violation of which generates kares. The Gemara could have said that by Mila as well, but the Gemara had a better answer by Mila, that it has Yud Gimel brisos.
Okay, so sorry to bother.
And he says, that maybe in Mila, in a case where he just delays the Mila till after Shabbos, he would not violate an Isa Karis. So that's why the Gemara didn't mention Karis by Mila. In the case of Pesach, the very moment that he waits till Sunday, it's already too late for the Korban Pesach, he will violate an Isa Karis. Now the Gemara wants to derive Esei Dochalosaseh, Mitamid, from the Korban Tamid. Because once again, the Korban Tamid is brought on Shabbos. And if the Tamid, which is a mitzvah saseh, is Docha Shabbos, the Shechita of the Korban Tamid is Docha Shabbos, then here we have a perfect example of an Esei Dochaloseh Sheish Bo Kares. Or it says, no. Tamid is on a special level. I admit that it's not Yud Gimel Brisos. I admit that it's not an Esei Sheish Bo Kares. But what's unique about the Korban Tamid? Ma'aleh Tamid Shekenu Tad. We always upgrade the status of a mitzvah if it's tadir. The fact that it's tadir and it's regular means that it's very, very significant in the eyes of the Almighty. And every day we bring a Korban Tamid, Shel Boker, and another Korban Tamid, Shel Bein Arbayim. And the power of a Korban Tamid and its significance is that it overrides even a Lo Taseh Sheish Bo Kares. But you can't say that about Yibum. Yibum is not Tadir at all. If I'm not mistaken, one of the reasons we fast on Shivasa B'Tammuz is because Batal HaTamid. Am I right? Rabbi, do you remember that? I think so. There are a number of reasons why we fast on Shivasa B'Tammuz. There was Nishtabra Luchos, and so for the siege, and so forth. But one of them, I think, is because Batal HaTamid. Tamid is so essential. And that's appropriate for this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayikra, because Vayikra is a book about Karbanos. And we have to understand and appreciate the significance of Karbanos. And on the top of the list, I would put Tamid. So the Gemara says, you know what? Maybe Michad lo asya, but Teisi mitarte. Why don't we try something called a Ksad HaShavah? Whenever you have a pircha on A and then a pircha on B, if the two pirchas are different, then we can join forces for A plus B and create a Ksad HaShavah. So one mitzvah will not teach me Esei Dochaloseh. Another mitzvah will not teach me, but if we join the two mitzvahs together, so the Gemara says, Mehei Teisi. Let's go through the various possible scenarios. Number one, Mimila Mi Pesach. You can't join Mila and Pesach because they both really have the same pircha. Shekein Karetz. If you violate either Mila or Pesach, you chayiv Karetz. Let's try Pesach and Tamid. Tamid is not a chayiv Karetz. And the answer is Shekein Tzar Kavah. They're both Karbanos that are brought to the Mizbeach. So maybe that gives it that special status that it's able to override a Lotas, even if a Lotas is Yeshbo Karetz, it's Tzar Kavah. Let's try Mila and Tamid. Mila is not a carbon, so it doesn't lend itself to the pircha of Shekein Tzar Kavah. And Tamid is not a Chiyav Karetz or Yud Gimel Brisos. So the pircha that we applied to Mila is not going to apply to Tamid. And the Gemara answers Shekein Yeshno Lifnei Adibur, that these two mitzvahs were given to Klal Yisrael before Matan Torah. In the case of Mila, Mila was given to Avraham Avinu. And in the case of the Tamid, it was also given before Matan Torah. Now here we have to turn to the end of Parshas Mishpatim in Sefer Shmos. And the pasuk says, "Vayishlechu es nare bnei Yisrael vayalu olos." Machlokas Rishonim exactly when this took place. Was it before Matan Torah? After Matan Torah? Was it on the 6th of Sivan? Or on the 7th of Sivan? Possibly on the 5th of Sivan? Again, there were many Shitas, Rashi, Ramban. But be that as it may, we're talking about bringing olos, and that's before Matan Torah. Olas Tamid Ava. What were these olos? Well, that's a big machlokus, but we're going according to that Madyamu who identifies the olos as the carbon olas tamid. So there's a certain chashivus and a special status to a mitzvah that was given even before Matan Torah. So the Gemara continues and says, "V'im mikulu nami shekein yeshnon lifnei adibur." Mikulu nami. Let's add into this cholent of a tzad shava. We'll add to Mila and Tamid Korban Pesach. Not going to solve your problem. Korban Pesach was brought in Mitzrayim before Matan Torah. So the same pircha of Kodem Matan Torah Bamidbar applies to Korban Pesach as well. So now we have the mitzvah of Kibud Av Va'em, which is a classic mitzvah. It is not a mitzvah sheish bo kares. It's not a mitzvah of tzorach gavoa, nor was it given Kodem Matan Torah. And yet we're going to prove that at least in the Havamina, Kibud Av Va'em would override the Shabbos. Imagine my father asks me to shecht an animal for him on Shabbos, or to cook some raw meat for him on Shabbos. He's very hungry. So on the one hand, it's Kibud Av, but on the other hand, Shabbos. I might think that Kibud Av Va'em is Docha Shabbos. We're going to need a special Yalfusa to derive the conclusion that Kibud Av Va'em does not override Shabbos. But if not for that special Yalfusa, we would have applied the principle of Essay Docha Losas, even though it's a classic essay, and the Losas of Shabbos is Yesh Bo Karetz. Tamalomer ish imo v'oiv tiro v'yeshab sosai tishmoru ani Hashem kulchem chayovim b'chvodi. So now we have Shmir Shabbos, and that's Kvod Hashem. And now you want to override the Shabbos of Kvod Hashem for the sake of Kvod of it. So we say, no, kulam chayovim b'chvodi. You know, just like you're chayiv in the covenant of Hashem, and you're enjoined from doing malacha, heating or cooking on Shabbos, so too your father or your mother are also included in that obligation of Shmiras HaShabbos. And Kavod HaKadosh Baruch Hu trumps Kavod Kibud Av Va'em. But again, what would have been if not for the pasuk of Eshab Sosai Tishmoru, we would have taken the mitzvah of Kibud Av Va'em to its nth degree to override the Shabbos. My love, the Yomalei Shchot Li Basheli. The father asks him on Shabbos to shecht an animal, so I'll get fresh meat, or to cook the meat. The time of the course of Rachman Hashem Sosi Tishmor Olav Hochi Dochi. Had it not been for the extra possible Eshab Sosi Tishmoru, Kibud Av Va'em would override the Shabbos. So we see that Esei Dochalose Sheyesh Bo Kares. And from this we would extrapolate and apply it to all mitzvahs that they are capable of overriding a lav sheyesh bo kares. And the Gemara says, "Lo, that's not a valid proof." And here we turn to the vav. We're talking about lav b'machamer. The havamina that Kibud Av Va'em would violate, override the Shabbos was not a malacha like shchita or bishul, which is an isur lav of kares, but rather we're talking about machamer. And in the case of machamer, we're talking about a classic lav, and we would have applied esei dochalosaseh to a classic lav. What exactly is machamer? Machamer is when you go behind the beast of burden and you sort of give it a nudge or you pull it from the front. And the Torah says, Yom HaShvi Shabbos Hashem Elokech Losasa Kol Moloch Atah Ubincha V'Tech etc. Ubehemtecha. And Behemtecha teaches me the love of Muhammad to drag the animal or coax the animal that is holding on to a bird. And now we're talking about overriding the Shabbos for the lav, a classic lav she'ein bo kares. And here we had a havamina that kibbut avayim would be docha the lav of ein bo kares, of machamer. But we never had a possibility of saying that for the sake of kibbut avayim, we would override the Shabbos and violate an Isur kares. Hence, we're back to our original kasha. We don't know, we have no source from whence we could prove that Yibum, the mitzvah of Yibum, would override the erva of Achos Isha, which is a chiv kares. How do we know that essay would be docha losa sheyesh bo kares?